Welcome to the weekly pivot for October 12th, 2025. So, quite a week last week. We're going to go through it. We'll talk about how we did with the levels from last week. I'm actually going to walk you through Friday and kind of how things unfolded for me. I was long in the morning, caught off guard, but then immediately flipped bias and ended up trading the levels that we talked about last week. We'll talk about upcoming events. Obviously, data is still being impacted by the U.S. government being shut down. So we'll take that with a grain of salt. And then, of course, we will go through some SPX analysis. We'll do some weekly analysis, some daily analysis, and some hourly analysis, something tactical that you can use for next week. So last week we were looking for a retest of 6750, and then we were looking for some continuation up to 6775 and ultimately 6800, which we didn't get. We did get the 6750 retest. We even got a little bit above it before things broke down on Friday. And we were looking for a zone break of 6700, 6680 for continued downside. We did end up losing that 6700 pivot. We backtested it as resistance on Friday, and then that took us down to all the levels that we talked about last week and then some. So here is my play-by-play. We were talking through this in my notes in Discord, and I've kind of copied some of those here just so you can kind of see everything in context. Quite a day. So I was long on the open on Friday and ended up taking this Golden Gate play that we had. We tapped the Golden Gate and was looking for, close the Golden Gate, ended up scaling out and then exiting most of my initial position. I took SPY. I was trading light on Friday. I mentioned that in the morning plan. So wasn't, looking for anything major to happen. Kind of was looking for a little bit of continuation here. We ended up getting this kind of flag. So I re-entered longs in the anticipation that we would close off this Golden Gate. And then all the stuff happened, and I ended up closing out that long for a loss, the second one for a loss. I was also long on Apple, long on Nvidia, short-term positions. I'm also long on those longer-term positions, but I had some short-term contracts for next week. Apple 260 calls, Nvidia 200 calls that were actually doing great in the morning, and I had scaled out some of the position already, but they all got stopped out. All my longs, my short-term long positions got stopped out on this, holy SHI, candle. So obviously there was some news. There was the Trump-China beef escalating, the trade wars escalating, and I was caught off guard. You can see here I posted at 11 o'clock that I was, that was unexpected for me. We got -1 ATR in basically less than 10 minutes. I was personally still looking at the hourly structure holding. We had bounced off the hourly 48 multiple times. And so this, for me, it was a exercise in, hey, this is not working out. Let me reassess and let's revisit the levels that we talked about. So the important thing here was that we ended up testing this 6680, and we talked about it last week that the 6680, 6700 zone was really important. If we started to lose that and 6700 pivot was the key here, then we were going to probably go test some levels south. And of course that happened. I did initially think 6680 was going to hold, and I actually took a 6700 call long here. Thinking, hey, maybe we'll break 6,700 and we'll just rebound. Maybe this is just a quick blip down to -1 ATR, and then we'll recover the move with a V-shaped recovery. We had plenty of resistance here at 6,700, and I noted that. And then I went short on 6,700 puts at 6,700, looking for this, potential flag break. We got it. We hit all of the levels that we were looking for last week for the downside: 6660, 6640. And then we went down to 66.25, where we found some support right down here before sort of retesting this 3-minute ribbon. Held the 3-minute 13 resistance, almost made it back to the 3-minute 21, but we really never tested the 3-minute 21 until this resistance here. And I mean, we continued all the way down. I was looking for 6,600 as the next level down, and we went all the way down to 6,600. Now, here's where things got interesting for me. I really thought 6,600 might be the bottom. Almost a 3 ATR move, -3 ATR move is a pretty incredible move for a single day. It's rare for us to even get a -2 ATR move. So -3 ATR move is very, very, very rare. So, I exited my 6,700 puts, and I ended up getting 6,600 calls. Scaled out, and the resistance prior support at 66.25 that had flipped into resistance. And so the anticipation was that if we can break through that resistance, we'll go back and test -2 ATR around 6640 in this supply zone. We didn't end up getting that. So I ended up putting in break-even stops on my 6,600 calls, and those ended up just triggering slightly above break-even to cover the commissions. And those ended up breaking. I didn't get short again, and at that point I'd already been in so many trades for the day, so I was trying to minimize the number of trades that I was taking. And, we continued down. It actually went a lot further than this. I think it went down to 6550 and even almost 6,500 in after hours. So I wanted to kind of walk through this one to show you how on a tactical level to trade against the levels that we talked about last week. We talked about both situations. The anticipation was that we would continue higher. We ended up getting the break of the zone. And from that point, it's like, all right, well, what are our levels for the downside? What resistance am I looking to short against? And where are we going to go from here? All right, so let's talk about next week. So Monday, we've got a bank holiday. Cash settlement might be impacted. So if you've got a cash account, anything that you used up, any buying power you used up on Friday may likely not return until Tuesday. The bond market is closed. Equities and futures are open, though. Fed Chair Powell on Tuesday at 12:20 p.m., he's doing a speech on economic outlook. I'm sure everybody will be watching that. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we have the normal CPI, PPI, and then potentially non-farm if the government opens back up. We've got Beige Book on 2 p.m. on Wednesday, and that's kind of the highlights. There's a lot of Fed speakers this week. So kind of the usual suspects this week, with the highlight being that Fed Chair Powell speech on Tuesday. So let's talk about some SPX charts. So on the right, I've got the weekly chart. On the left, I've got the daily chart. Big candle last week, kind of giving me some vibes from last year. This was the carry trade blowing up for Japan. This was the pullback that we had before the bigger move to the downside. Kind of giving me like similar vibes to that. We've got the weekly pullback. As of now, it's just a weekly 8 test. Serious candle, pretty decent volume. So I am expecting, that we could continue a little bit further. And obviously, we've been talking about it, I think, for about four or 5 weeks. We'd love to have a bigger pullback on the weekly. Maybe we'll get it. Maybe we'll get it now. On an intraday basis, we ended up testing the daily 48 right here. And this is also the short level, which unlocks us really down to kind of 6,400 if we want to get continuation on this move. If we start to break the daily 48, which of course after hours we are below it, we're closer to here. We can get continuation down, and I see some demand down here around 6,400 to 6,350, we'll call it, which kind of lines up with the weekly 21 pullback. So, I think if we get, and you can see we've got our momentum dots firing on the daily and the weekly from the distribution zone. So, some weekly mean reversion would be great. And I think that that's something that we could target if we get continuation to the downside and then look for some support there for a potential bounce into the end of the year. What does it look like tactically? On the left here, I have a standard hourly RTH chart, the one that we've been looking at every week. And on the right side, I have a hourly daily time warp. So the daily ribbon is represented here. You can see that we're close to the daily 48. So we've got this phase oscillator signal that's kind of off the charts here at -1 and 41. Usually you're gonna get some retracement. So after hours, we've kind of come down to this 513 level. And so I am expecting some back tests of some of these levels before there would be any continuation to the downside, closing this golden gate down to 64.71 and then potentially going down for a weekly mean reversion. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. There's some important levels here. We've got, these key resistances and intraday resistances and support. 6,600 is important. 65.90 is important. That was -3 ATR yesterday. 66.20 and 66.25 was an important resistance pivot from Friday. So back testing some of those on an upside move. Watch for resistance there for continuation downside. If we get above that, then I'd be looking for a potential daily 21 back test. If we do, then we're looking for a recovery of the daily 21, and then I think things would be kind of back to normal again for the bulls. Otherwise, my anticipation is we're going to go down, we're going to do some back tests of levels. We're going to find some resistance somewhere up here, and then we'll continue down to visit some of these levels all the way down to this demand between 6,350 and 6,400. And that's your weekly pivot for October 12th, 2025. I will see you in the next one.